Welcome. Today is March 7th. It's Friday. I always get really excited when it's Friday. And I have a guest today. Thank you and for joining me on your daily dose of salt and light with myself, Nadine's. I forgot to do the whole intro, but I do have a guest today, and it's someone that I met at America Fest when I was there in December. And then we ran into each other again at CPAC in Washington, D.C. So we connected. I was on his show a few days ago, and we talked about a poll that he's recently done. We're going to talk about it on the show. We're going to talk about a lot of things, a lot of sentiment of Americans towards Canada, towards what's happening with the Canada tariff war. So it's going to give you a glimpse into a little bit of where Americans are on this whole issue. And we're going to talk about other things too. And so my guest name is Mark Mitchell. He's with Rasmussen Reports. So I'm going to play an intro too that kind of shows you guys a little bit about who they are. Actually, I'm actually shocked that I've been able to make this connection, because Mark Mitchell is kind of a big deal in the US. He's known as the biggest pollster, the most accurate pollster. He's also the most hated pollster by the left. He was one of the only ones who was polling Trump to win the election, was accurate in that. I'm going to play a little bit of a video for you guys so you can kind of see a little bit of who he is. And then we'll bring him on shortly after that. This is actually his intro video to his show. I was listening to it. I'm like, wow, he's a lot more impressive than I initially thought. Not that I didn't think he was, but we're going to play that anyways. It's the intro video.
And we just had some great polling come out. I think the most accurate poll over the last 8 or 9 years was Rasmussen. They just came out with a poll that we're 5 up.
Take a look here. This is the number of polls per week that were released. So why is it that on August 18th, August 11th, why are the number of polls going down, the number of polls released? It's because of this. When the polling data fits the media narrative, the polls get released.
Let's bring on Mark Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, how are you, sir?
Doing really well. Yeah, we nailed it.
Yes, you did.
We really nailed it.
I won't play the whole thing because there's a lot to it, but it's obviously another 4 minutes. But it just goes to show he goes on all the news network and all the podcasters, and he brings a lot of truth to the US. And when I talked to him, I said, how is it working in the polling industry? And he says it's very slanted to the left. And we've noticed that as well in Canada. Often the polls are not reflective of the results, and it's mostly always slanted to the left. And he says even him just wanting to accurately depict what is happening often gets attacked. So with that, I am going to bring him up. Thank you, Mark Mitchell, for coming on my show.
Yeah, that was a great intro. Thanks so much. Definitely hated. They hate us so much. And definitely lots of lies, dishonesty, and a leftward slant in our industry. And we were looking, when you were on my show Wednesday, we were looking at 338 in Canada. And I'm actually pretty impressed. I mean, I'm sure it's not all 100% above board, but it doesn't look like it's nearly as bad as the problem we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You guys have something else. I didn't even know about 338. I mean, I see polls on Twitter and stuff being shared by people, but I didn't know we had a place to go to look at all of the polls like you guys do in the US. And I was so impressed by the one you guys have, but we have similar things here. So you mentioned about potentially working in Canada and doing some polling in Canada. So I'm going to see if I can make that happen. I think we need more pollsters who are not trying to hide the truth. And maybe I'll connect you with some people, because I do know there's a lot of desire for accurate polling. And you mentioned something too. How you phrase the question has a lot to do with the results that you get. Do you want to explain that a little bit, or maybe share your thoughts on that, on where or maybe even give an example of that? Because that way we can look at the polling that's done in Canada and evaluate it from that perspective too when we see results.
Yeah, you know what? I'll give you just a few minutes of scummy polling primer, like how
Okay.
all the different ways that people can lie and cheat. And what people in the industry say is, well, we'll just increase transparency and then you can trust us more. But take it from me, there's zero correlation between transparency and actual accuracy. In fact, I think it's inversely correlated, and I've had some aggregators tell us that. So I'm transparent, like we put out what we put out, and it tells you how we conduct our methodology, but I'm not putting out the raw data. I'm not going to give you people's like names and addresses
Yeah.
and stuff. And so a lot of it comes down to trust. And the problem is in our industry is that people have thrown trust out the window, which is why we're successful. We're independent. We're not affiliated with any party. I don't report up to some big boss in a liberal media organization. I'm not located on a college campus. Our business will fail if we're not accurate. And so I think that that's probably the highest way to maintain trust. But as far as cheating, you get a feel for how different data sources lean. So I could select data sources that I know will give me a certain type of result. You can cull the data. You can say, oh, I don't like this result. I'm going to just delete it and not use it. You could change the data. I'm sure some people have actually done that. And then it comes down to also like how the poll is structured and wording. And that's a big one too. And that's one of the ones that they use like all of the time. So for instance, if I'm going to do a political matchup, I'm going to put it pretty close to the beginning of the poll. It's going to be like, hey, what's your gender? What's your age? Are you Republican or Democrat? Hey, in this election, who are you going to vote for? But a lot of times they'll do something different. They'll put it at the end and then they'll ask a bunch of issue questions. And then so like the poll might be full of things about sexism or racism. And then they're like, okay, do you want Kamala Harris or Trump? Kamala Harris is going to get like probably a 3 to 5 point advantage because of that. And then there's the question wording itself. It's like, okay, Donald Trump kicks kittens. Do you approve or disapprove of Donald Trump? And, it's not usually that overt, but they can absolutely do that. And tariffs is a really good example. It's really hard to ask about tariffs. You're trying to make a very simple, straightforward question, give just enough information to the person answering it, but without priming them for a certain result. And so you will see results about tariffs that completely span the entire numerical gamut, from incredibly pro-tariff to very, very anti-tariff. And then on top of that, there's, okay, well, I'm just going to not release these results because I don't like them, or I'm going to selectively pick the poll weighting factors that I use because I know if I weight this way, I'm going to get a certain result than if I weight this way. And then a lot of these people even build their own proprietary panels, but they're run by like Marxist liberals that have pronouns in their bio. And it just goes on and on and on. And I think even some of these pollsters, their boss is telling them to change results. They don't like that. You can't release that. And they certainly, one of the big ones is just lies by omission. Like they will not poll on things that they know they're going to get bad results on. Like very few people polled on favorability for the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk's Doge outfit, because they knew the results were going to be favorable. There's only like 2 or 3 of us that did it, and we were one of the big ones. So I could go on and on about this topic, and there's certainly ways to see through it, but that's kind of a bigger topic, getting into crosstabs and stuff like that. But yeah, there's so much stuff they can do. And what it ultimately comes down to is when you have an establishment that's trying to maintain power, it's not even a right or left thing. It's establishment trying to maintain power. Well, it turns out they'll just completely throw out their integrity to maintain power.
One of the things that we talked about too, you said lies by omission or even just not polling. And you've gotten a lot of flack too in polling on social issues in the US, like the gender wars and all of that, the biological males playing in female sports and stuff. But you guys haven't shied away from that at all. You've been reporting and gotten a lot of heat from it. I remember you telling me that when we were at AmFest. So you want to talk about that just even a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And I would love to know the third rail topics in Canada. So if we do come and poll Canada, that I can like piss the requisite number of people off. You know what I mean? Like I would love to be immediately hated. So maybe we can get the right questions in the first poll. What we do is different than other people. We pretty much are polling every day, and we put out stories on issues. And a lot of these people are focused on just elections only. And I think that
Mhm.
helps us be more accurate because, an example, people will say, oh, well, in the US, the economy's always been the number one issue. Um, and this time it's also true. It was the number one issue when you put like 8 different choices and tell people to pick one. But there was this very anti-government undercurrent that we picked up that other people didn't, because we asked questions like, do you trust the federal government? Are you safer than you were 4 years ago? Will today's children be better off than their parents? So that's the kind of stuff a lot of people don't do just because, they don't want to report on that stuff, or they don't want to like put the narrative out that's pro-Trump. And then like the big one was 2020.
Mhm.
There are a lot of reasons to expect that the outcome of our 2020 election was not above board. And so there was a full on information war in the United States around 2020 that involved our own government censoring individuals on social media, which
Mhm.
seems kind of common these days in non-American countries, but was very big deal. They literally did it was the boot on the neck of Americans. And what turns out is that it was kind of like the Streisand effect. And despite all of that censorship and oppression, we got up to a point where we were the only ones that polled on election integrity, essentially. And we got up to 2 out of 3 American likely voters thinking that the outcome of the 2024 election, then upcoming, would be affected by cheating. And that was not a happy narrative. Like, people did not like that we were out there putting that. And then, of course, we polled on vaccines. So that made
Mhm.
us like super persona non
Hate it.
grata. Yes.
I think that that would probably be the case in Canada too. One of the things that we've seen in Canada is polling being specifically released to try to make you think you're the only one who disagrees or thinks about it. But when you look at the questions, it's very much slanted. A perfect case of that would have been like during COVID. Then we also got that when it came to the parental rights legislation. They tried to make it seem like parents weren't in support of it, or that the province wasn't in support of it. And now we're seeing that in other areas as well. Like more recently, we talked about it on the show. Maybe I'm going to see if I can bring it up on the screen. But there was a news article by CBC. Just so if we have Americans watching right now, CBC is like the paid propaganda arm of the government. They're very left leaning, not very accurate. But I'll see if I can bring it up quickly. We shared it. I don't know if you still have it, or did you share it in the group in our chat, or did you just
Oh, that
bring it up?
article.
Yeah, do you remember?
Um, let me. I might have it in my.
I'll see if I can find it.
Who
What
are the
what it was.
Canadians who would support a 51st state? Is that?
Yeah, yeah. So the article was reporting it as if it was like current accurate data like today, and we're now March 7th. But then they said like
Oh,
in the
right. Yeah.
article title it was the Angus Reid one.
Yep.
But it was polled in January before the polling for the Conservatives. Um basically our polling for the last like 2 years, Conservatives been winning a majority, and in the last few weeks, the narrative in Canada has completely changed. The Liberals have used this tariff war to gain momentum. There's a new leadership race that's happening, so the polls kind of move back. So I think that separatism, um I guess the people who want Western separatism is much higher than what they're showing, but they were using this poll. I don't know if you have it. Oh, you
I
put it
dropped
in
it in the
here.
private chat. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a really big one, is timing. And it
Mhm.
comes down to, like, on some things it doesn't matter. Like, if I polled, "Hey, America, do you like chocolate or vanilla ice cream?" It doesn't matter. Like, I would refer to
Mhm.
numbers 3 years old ago, and it's fine. But in that intro video that you showed, the second person there talking was Tom Ellsworth from Patrick Bet David's Valuetainment channel, and he
Mhm.
picked up, that was a tweet that I had done, because what was interesting is that after Joe Biden resigned and Kamala Harris was endorsed by him to take over, everybody came out with a flurry of polls right away, and then it was dead silent in the American media for like 2 weeks. I was the only pollster putting out numbers. And that's because what happens when something like that, you get a bounce where everybody's like, oh, cool, something new. And there'll be a high number and then it fades. And so nobody wanted to poll to show that her numbers were fading after an initial bounce. And they were putting out so few polls that it was like less than 6 months prior, like way far away from the election. So that's just one of the many ways. And they might be doing it here too. It's like if things are changing rapidly, a 2-month-old set of numbers like is probably irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you said that because I hadn't really thought we're in a very similar situation than you guys. You had Biden kind of going to be in the next election. He steps down. Kamala Harris comes on. She starts polling really high because it's new, it's fresh. And then as people started listening to her and how she was making no sense,
Yeah.
really, and she was just such a poor candidate, she started polling down more. I'm wondering if that's what we're seeing in Canada because there's a leadership race happening. We already know it's most likely going to be Mark Carney, and then so the momentum went way up, and sorry, and now we're seeing that it's starting to go down again. So I'm wondering if it's just
Yeah.
because it's new, or
Well, what I
I'm
can tell
wondering.
you,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
is that our numbers moved actually completely opposite the average polling industry. Like if you look at our polling aggregator that we trust here is Real Clear Politics, and the industry leans left. They were about a point and a half, two left in the battleground states this time, which is actually pretty good. I mean, they've been way worse, but they're always left. But what's interesting is that they moved opposite of me. So for all of the early 2024, I had Trump beating Biden like between 5 and 10 points. And the industry showed that, well, no, it was way less than that. They barely had Trump winning, maybe 2 or 3 points. And then what happened is after Joe Biden's horrifying debate, my numbers, the lead that Trump had shrank. He actually went from like 7 to like 4. And everybody else in the industry immediately like surged up and showed Trump doing better.
Wow.
Now, what's weird about that is the reason that Trump's lead shrank is because a lot of Democrats who were being objective about Biden is like, oh, this guy's falling downstairs. We can't support him. All of a sudden, we're like, oh crap, Trump's going to win this. And they circle the wagons and they start answering polls. They decide they're going to vote. And what happened, I think, in the rest of the industry, everybody's like, oh man, we got to get a Biden out. So our numbers like moved opposite, right? And then what happened is that she came in and she did narrow the race from like Trump up 5 to Trump down 2. And my numbers, it just stayed there the rest of the fall. Because I think most people in my polling, like, they're like, okay, she's better than him. She can fog a mirror. But she wasn't convincing anybody. And the people that wanted to vote for her were going to vote for her. It was like all locked in. But what happened after that is that in the industry, she got this massive, massive wave of support from October or August all the way to October. And it like my polling didn't show it at all. It was like they're like this, and I'm just going along straight. And that was all fake and was like literally fake. So what we did was we like literally proved them all wrong. And maybe you guys need something like that because I see a real huge surge right now. The Conservative Party Canada is like tanking in the polls.
We
Since
should
January, right?
bring that up too, and you can kind of talk about your analysis of it. One of the things I want to talk about, we talked about this on your show. So this is the article I was talking about. But it's funny, they say fringe group supports the notion of joining the United States in the face of Trump. And then we kind of went into that polling. And I think Alberta and Saskatchewan was polling 16 and 15%. So 16 Alberta, 15. But I don't remember, maybe it was this one here. I kind of wish I was able to give you the access to this screen because you'll know where everywhere to go. But yeah, the poll was January 14th. But then if you go back to the article, they don't mention that it was several months ago.
Yeah, what you'd probably see is like surging
Oh
support
yeah, they do.
in
They do in
Saskatchewan.
January. They do here. I just noticed that
So
now.
this is like,
Mhm.
so Angus Reid, my understanding is they do a pretty good job. This was a good poll. The graphics were well put together that they did in their full report. But it's like you said, that word fringe is a pretty good giveaway that you're reading biased material.
Exactly. I'm trying to find where we find all of the polls so we can look at the most recent one
Yeah,
and the one for the CPC, which is like the Conservative Party.
oh,
Here,
I got that right here.
you have it? Yes. If you grab it put it in the chat. And I'm going to address a few of the comments as well while I bring that up. Here, give me 1 second. I'll put it on the screen. So a lot of people are saying hi. So I'm just going to give a shout out to a few of my regular. Neil Ness, Maria is on. Do I see Kevin? I don't see Kevin, but Jim Powell is on. I'm trying to see quickly. Oh, David is on too. Okay, I just didn't see it yet. So those are my usual. They always come every single day. I actually really like
Nice.
having them. The Canadian polls saying the PC's losing ground are fake due to false censored media. So this is one of the comments. It's probably just the Liberals who could not escape the observable horrors of Trudeau have found a way to vote for party over country like they always do. So a lot of here I'm going to share the screen because this is huge.
Yeah.
So this is the current status for the polling. But yeah, you even like here you will have one. I wonder if I can click on it. There's one Liberal one showing winning.
Yeah, you gotta go down probably at the bottom where it lists
Okay, I see here. Yeah, Ecos has Liberals winning. And this was on March 3rd. Do you have any of these polling companies in the US?
Ipsos, although they're probably using a different panel than the one they use in America. But Ipsos partners with Reuters and ABC News in America, and they were on average about 5 to 6 points left of me when you look at
Okay.
like the Trump margin. So that's bad. And yet our aggregators routinely rank them higher, like way at the top, and then kick us out. But what's interesting is the way we do our methodology. We do a mix of landline and online panels, and I think we probably reach about 1 to 1.5 million potential Americans. The Ipsos panel in the US is a proprietary panel of only 50,000 people, and it's run by a very left-wing research organization. So one of the ways that you can benchmark this stuff is that they would be 6 points to the left of me, and I would say, wow, am I wrong or are they wrong? And then I would go into their crosstabs, and people watching you might not be familiar with that term, but there's usually a deliverable document that comes along with each poll that you'll be able to get on 338 Canada by clicking through. Here's an example. I'll drop it in the chat too.
Yeah.
And they all look different. Some people disclose more than others, but what you're looking at here is that there should be a breakdown of how people answer each question by demographic group and a list of all the other questions that were asked in the poll. This isn't really a good example of crosstabs. Like you have crosstabs from my polling that we could look at later. But what I would find when I went into ABC Ipsos polls is that when you look at Kamala Harris favorability, it was usually positive, like net favorability, where you take favorability minus unfavorable. And it was usually like net +2 or net +3. And then you'd look at Trump favorability and he'd be like -24. So that's like he got more votes than any Republican in history. And he's polling better than he has in history. And you're telling me his favorability rating is like 27 points worse than Kamala Harris. There's just no way. And so literally the humans that they're sampling, even though they're waiting for party, are just Trump deranged. They don't like Trump. And so I would find something like that in every one of these crosstabs. And that's how you can look and check, because I mean, people's opinions change really fast. And I don't have my finger on the pulse of Canada, but this is, if you go back up to the top, this is cataclysmal change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you normally don't see that unless something really horrifying happens. And maybe like the way people are sampling or because of confirmation bias, they're showing a bigger reaction than really would happen. Uh, or you guys are just like psychologically scarred by America. Like it's one of those two things, right? It's like,
Well, there's several things that occurred. Like there's two tabs here. So Trudeau resigned as
yeah,
the leader of the party. Well, basically, he announced he was resigning once we pick a new one. So there's been a leadership race. So Trudeau was hated all this time. Like if you look all the way here, they're not polling good at all. So Trudeau resigns, and then we have a new leadership race. So that same kind of thing that happened a little bit with you guys is happening. But you got to understand, in Canada, the Canadian population is very much brainwashed by mainstream media. So when
yeah,
mainstream media goes in one direction, it really, really sways public opinion. And like the whole Trump thing too, it all happened around the same time. So Trudeau resigning, a new leadership race, and then on top of that, the tariffs and the like, even seeing the narratives, they're all trying to link Pierre Poilievre to Trump. Everyone in Canada, or the majority of Canadians, have TDS, really dislike
yeah.
Trump. I think it was something like 75% of Canadians have a 25% have a favorable view of Trump, 75% have the opposite. They really don't like Trump. But again, those are polls. I don't know how accurate they are, but
Yeah, but even if it
Mhm.
was, I mean, they're not going to insert 20 or 30 points of bias, right?
Yeah.
And I can absolutely see why you guys hate him. You really have to understand how bad things were here and why people like him. The
Mhm.
truth is he's not well loved. He has a 50 or 51% favorable rating today, according to our numbers. We're the only people in America that poll presidential approval daily. And what we've seen is that the entire industry will sandbag Trump, just Trump. Like his numbers will always
Mhm.
be worse. So it's like they'll match me more or less. And then when Trump gets to the office, they'll drop. And then they'll come back up like after he gets out. Um, but 51%, like pretty good considering that things have gotten like what we poll on is stuff like, hey, how likely is it that there's going to be a civil war in America in the next few years? And that number is up to like 43%. It's really high. So the level of political the divisiveness is off the charts in America.
43%.
Yeah. Well, like we did not take kindly to being oppressed because of COVID.
Mhm.
And then Biden was really horrifying for expansion of government, wealth concentration, borrowing. Like basically, our late stage empire collapse was rapidly accelerated under Biden,
Mhm.
rapidly. And everybody rebelled against it, and we had a popular uprising. Now, presidents will get lower approval ratings in that kind of setting. So I
Mhm.
think the fact that like Trump got more votes this time than he did in 2016, but he entered with a lower approval rating. So I think he's going to sit at like 51%. And we had Biden leaving office at 43. So he's more loved than Biden. But the
Yeah.
trick about Trump is that every single component of his platform is way more popular than him. So
Mhm.
you guys might clutch pearls about mass deportations, but depending on the way you ask it, 60 to 65% of America is like deport them all, get them the hell out of
Mhm.
here, put the military on the border. And that was his number one issue. And then, weaponization of the federal government and cracking down on government waste. Those are all just off the charts popular. So that's why you guys don't see the benefit of Trump. We do because he's American first.
Mhm.
Like you got to get your own Trump who finds the set of issues and makes people disagreeable about them.
Yeah, I'm wondering too, like, Canadians absolutely, like, for the majority of Canadians really dislike Trump, but when I ask them, "Okay, what policy do you dislike?" Like, especially conservative Canadians, "What policy do you dislike?" And what it is mostly, they dislike his personality. They dislike his bruteness and just how he says everything he thinks, right? In Canada, it's very different. Politicians don't act like Trump. They act like a lot of the old school Republicans and still want that to stay. I don't think they want that massive change. I did feel Pierre was a little bit more like that. Like he's funny, he's salty, he's quick on his toes, he's really good with countering the narrative the mainstream media says. So he has some elements, but I don't think, to be honest, I
Yeah.
don't know if Canada would be ready for Trump, or if that would be good for Canada, in the sense the population is just not there. That could potentially
Yeah.
change if it gets desperate enough, or if they realize how desperate it is. But
I don't know much about him, but I don't think he's Trump. And here's why I say
no.
that is that he became very popular in America and went viral because of that. Like
Mhm.
basically, there's probably some other clips, but that one where he's eating an apple and just absolutely eviscerates that, like, I mean, that guy was just horrifying. And I'm sure, I don't know if he represents all of mainstream media in Canada, but he represents a kind of person that is
Mhm.
everywhere in our
Mhm.
media. And so it's very cathartic. But when people in America watch that, they say, wow, Canada has their Trump. But I think the difference might be is that when Trump first became popular and stole the base from conservatives, it was during the 2015-16 GOP primary. And so what he was doing is he was going up against a very crowded field of establishment Republicans and doing that same thing, but to the Republican establishment. And everybody's like, "Oh, this is
Oh.
epic." And so I highly doubt that that's what Pierre does. But somebody's got to come in and say, like, listen, like your party is not fighting for the things that the majority of Americans or Canadians like want or need. And that's what Trump did. And it took him a long time. It took him 8 years to get there where it was the majority, but he turned our country into a country that craves populist reform.
Mhm.
And he did it by attacking the Republican establishment and the media and everybody else too. But um,
I think Pierre's somewhat done that as much as you can, like, in Canada. However, with this tariff war, they're panicking because the polls are changing so much. They're starting to panic and they think, well, we have to go more left or else we'll never win. And unfortunately, it's left so many people. Like, if you look at most of the conservative commentators in Canada right now, they're like, what are you doing? Like, why are you losing yourself? Like, not everyone, but most of the commentators are saying the same thing. Like, we want the old Pierre back. And because he it's almost like the media narrative, the fear being pushing, and like he was pushing it a little bit too. I was so disappointed to see that he's pushing that Trump is actually serious about the 51st state and using that in his messaging. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
you're doing the same thing the left is doing right now. Most Canadians, and I think you shared some polls too, some polls about Americans. Most Americans think that that's just trolling. It's just a joke. But
yeah.
but when you have every politician in Canada, every mainstream media pushing it, a lot of the Canadians are actually believing it. Like, I wish Pierre would change that. And not only that, with the tariffs, he's pushing retaliatory tariffs, and every conservative commentators, every economic says this is going to be disastrous for Canada. It's going to hurt us more than it's going to hurt the US. What are we doing? So I am disappointed in him in that. I'm hoping he's going to listen to his base and to listen to what people are saying, and maybe stop being so afraid of the media, because usually he wasn't, but it's
You
almost
know,
like
I
he is
think
now.
like Nigel Farage is probably a really good example of what you guys could do better. And that is like, listen, Trump's going to be around for another 4 years. And depending on how things go, Trump 2.0, probably JD Vance, is going to be around. And so Trump is either going to succeed very big and there will be a like freaking golden age of populist middle class first policies in the US that probably by extension are less beneficial for the economics of other Western countries just because we've been screwed over so bad for so long. Or he's going to lose big and the pendulum's going to swing back and then all of MAGA is going to be thrown in jail. I don't know. Like things might get really dark. Um, but I guess my point is for this foreseeable future, the leadership and thought work product behind Donald Trump is ascendant in DC. So what Pierre should be doing, or somebody who wants to challenge him, is be on the phone once a week with some surrogate in the Trump White House, understanding like what is the mutually beneficial agreement. Because Trump isn't, when Trump comes out and says something like annexing Canada, and maybe your viewers get this and maybe they don't, it's negotiation. It's not, it's some trolling. He's trying to get under Trudeau's skin. But it's really like negotiation. And the point in Trump's world about negotiation in these deals is that there's an upside for everybody. But the person on the other side of the table has to realize, have an objective evaluation of what they have. They're like cards, so to speak. And so I would say it doesn't sound like you're telling me that Canadian politicians have a very objective view of their bargaining position. So when Trump comes out and says annex Canada, he's trying to make a picture. Like, that's like if you're going to go buy a used car and you want to get it for the lowest price possible and you only have a certain amount you can spend, you're going to be like, oh my God, what a lemon. I don't want this. When it's like a lie, right? And you're trying to position, like, feel out the other person, gain information, destabilize things. But like they will talk to. They will say, no. He's just trying to get this outcome. And there's probably an ear that you guys can talk into that says, well, like, this is one of the things that we can bring to the table. I don't know. There's some deal where it's the exact same thing that he's doing with Ukraine and Russia. It's like there will not be peace in a situation where Russia gets zero. I'm sorry. There's just not going to be. And there's not going to be peace where Ukraine gets 100%. And so his issue is like when Zelensky comes in and just acts like he owns this whole thing and expects to get 100%, you got to knock him down a peg, because the deal's not going to happen until Ukraine and Russia are within spitting distance. So everybody's like, oh, retaliatory tariffs or blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, it's probably not better for everybody. And whether it's better for Canada or not, I guess we'll have to see. But the Trump will just be like, okay, they're not ready yet. Like, screw you. Come back in 2 months when you're capitulated, and then your bar power is weaker. And like we've seen it over and over again. Same playbook.
One of the things, like, I've been reading, listening. I listen to a lot of audiobooks when I'm driving around. Never Split the Difference. I don't know if you've read that book.
I haven't.
There's Getting to Yes too, which is a negotiation book. But one of the biggest things they should be recognizing, basically not empathizing, that's not even the term, but when you put into words what the other person's motivation for what they're doing before you address the negotiation, it builds rapport. You understand them. They feel less like attacked. But one of the things that I haven't seen any of the conservatives do that. I haven't seen any of the liberals do that, but I don't expect them to. I expect people who usually have similar common values to be easier to negotiate with. But like Trump has said over and over, a lot of the manufacturers have left the US. He's tweeted about it again today. Here, I'll just share it really quickly. But none of the people who are like screaming, oh, counter tariffs, are recognizing, okay, Trump is upset. He's doing this because of obviously many reasons. Let's look at what those be. And instead of saying, oh, he's just an evil dictator that wants to take over the world, because that's like the narrative they're trying to push. He wants to take over Canada by force, wants to start a war with Canada. But I'll share this tweet by Trump. He says, the head of United Auto Worker of America just stated that tariffs are necessary to correct years of abuse of the USA by other countries and companies. We have lost 90,000 factories and plants since the beginning of NAFTA. He is 100% correct. This was Trump this morning. Numerous times he's talked about the fentanyl drug problem that's making its way to the US, but it's not necessarily being created in the US. It's created in China, Mexico, and Canada is a big part of that. They have intel that even our own government is choosing to ignore. Like, it's not like they're clueless as to what's happening in Canada. We have foreign interference to an extreme level. We've allowed terrorists to come in and stay in. Some of them have tried to cross the border into the US. Actually, more per capita has come, more extremists and terrorists per capita has come through the border, the Canadian border, than
Wow.
Mexico per capita. But
Yeah.
so he has legitimate grievances. I wish that our politicians would address those prior to basically doing these public displays of being angry, but or whatever you want to call it. But you did some polling more recently. I'm going to see if I can bring it up on the screen. I'm just trying to, I had it
Yeah,
ready
if you
to.
want to know what Trump is pushing for, it's always a middle class American maximalist position. That's it. And invading Canada is not in the best interest of the middle class of the United States. So he's not really pushing that. But reclaiming lost manufacturing base is absolutely in the best interest. And so that's the sum total of what he's trying to get at. Rebalance the economic equation.
So the auto industry, so in Ontario, the auto industry is big, and the aluminum, metals, all of that is really big in Ontario. And it's one of the things that I saw when he's kind of saying we're reducing some of the tariffs, he's keeping some of them. And a lot of them are kind of related to the auto industry. So I foresee this being like an issue that's not going to be let go. And we have a premier in Ontario that's it is one of the worst, I think, but I don't think he realizes that they kind of take it as an attack or an act of war, which I don't quite grasp. It's like that privilege mindset. We should have the privilege to have access to your market. So Trump stopping that privilege is not attacking you, is just saying, hey, we're gonna take care of our own. We're gonna start doing our own vehicles. You guys figure it out. I don't see that as an attack. Will it affect us negatively? Yes, but
Yeah. Those positions don't sound like Canada first position. They don't.
no.
Because Trump's not, he doesn't get into pissing matches with foreign nations just because of like nationalistic reasons. He gets into them to try and get a better position for Americans. So the best position for you guys is probably not retaliatory tariffs and to like rattle the saber. And yet that's what they're doing. They're clearly not Canada first, right?
No, and that's the thing, like retaliatory tariffs affect Canadians. It's like a double hit. We're already being hit with the tariffs announced by Trump, but now we're going to punish ourselves even more by doing more tariffs. Like we're not even set in Canada to sell only to Canadians. We don't have the market. We don't produce enough to be able to buy Canadian, even if we wanted to. A lot of the stuff we get comes from outside of Canada, and that's our own fault. We've completely stifled our economy, stifled our manufacturing with red tape, too many taxes. $500 billion worth of capital has moved from Canada to the US in the last few years. Like we've done this to ourselves, but yet nothing's been done to actually put into motion things that would make us stronger. Open pipelines throughout Canada, open manufacturers, lowering the red tape, lower the taxes. Like ever since Trump has announced that, there's been nothing gone in that direction. But with that, a lot of people are super upset, and mostly people in the countries that in the provinces that do well. Alberta and Saskatchewan, we have a lot of natural resources. We have uranium, we have potash, which those are still things the US are going to continue buying because the production is not available in the US for potash, and it wouldn't be for like 10 years. So we do have a lot of goods. With that, there's a lot of Western alienation that's happening. And that's why I came to you and I said, what can you poll Americans to see what they think about maybe not all of Canada joining, but maybe some of the provinces? And you came out with these numbers.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't, you pulled it.
Not a lot of people have been polling on this topic for sure. And we don't poll a lot on Canada. We polled on the trucker protests. We've polled on, the tariffs and trade deals that were talked about back in 2018 or 2019. And this was just like, hey, let's figure out what we can find out. So for people who aren't familiar, this is like a little bit more what traditional crosstabs look like. This was a poll conducted last week of 1,200 U.S. likely voters, which is a good size for a national poll. It's got like a margin of error of 3% plus or minus. But usually the number's a lot closer than the margin of error would have you think. And so this total column is what the actual answers to the questions were. But then in crosstabs, demographic breakdown. So then we could see how, okay, well, how did men and women answer differently?
Mhm.
Did the young voters answer different than the old voters? Was there a signal among race? And political party is usually where the biggest signal lies. That's what we look at a lot. And for people who don't know, Democrats are super left, like kind of insane left, and Republicans are like, that's Trump voters, but there's a good chunk of them that are still kind of establishment enjoyers.
Mhm.
So they have no idea what to think about Trudeau. Like, it's generally actually pretty positive. He's got
I was shocked
46,
by these results.
46 favorable to 32 unfavorable. So he's net plus 14, but it's kind of skewed a little bit because 22% of people just have no friggin' idea. I think it's like, well, I don't care that much about Canada, and he's been there a while, so he must be good for you guys. I don't know. That's even Republicans,
Here, I'll move it over.
36% of Republicans are like, yeah, sure, Trudeau. Now, like core MAGA, they know he's, they call him Castro, and they put pictures of him in blackface up and stuff like that. So core MAGA gets it, but like only 24% of Republicans said very unfavorable. That's really wild. Because
Yeah.
like 57% of Americans supported the trucker protests. So like this just makes absolutely no sense to me. And then a plurality of voters said that Trudeau's probably been good for Canada, 33% to 27% bad. And like
I was
super
shocked
weird.
by that. Yeah, the good for Canada here, it's like 50, what is that? 33 plus, no, that's good, bad, not much difference. Okay. I thought it was like the same as these ones, but
Yeah, so
still,
good
I'm
or not much
shocked by that.
difference is like a combined 52%.
Yeah, I'm shocked by that.
Plus 20. Well, not much difference or not sure is a 40% signal. So literally 4 in 10 Americans like, I don't know. Now I thought when I looked at these, I'm like, we must have messed something up because there's like not much of a party signal at all. And like even the Democrats, you'd expect a higher good. It's only 45% of them. But then if you look, like this last question is the key question, the reason we did the whole
Yeah.
thing. But if some Canadian provinces wanted to secede from Canada, would you support or oppose having these Canadian provinces become part of the United States? And 50% supported, only 35% opposed. A net plus 15 is a really, really big margin. Like that's a big signal. And there was a really big difference between Democrats and Republicans here. So like we didn't mess the poll up. 68% of Republicans said, yeah, like bring it. And only 39% of Democrats, but it's still like a decent amount. So like this is decent support for the idea.
Mhm.
I would
There's a
not
question.
call it overwhelming support, but I would call it strong support.
There's a question in the comments. I keep hearing the word plurality. What does that mean?
It means the highest response that's not a majority. So like right
Okay.
here, 50, you see 24% strongly support, 26% somewhat support. So that's 50%. That's half. I would call that a majority support this. Now, if
Mhm.
instead those added up to like 48 or 49, I would say a plurality support it because a majority don't, but still most people pick support over oppose.
Mhm.
So it's like, well, like, look, 33% is a plurality in the second question because it's the highest number,
And
but it's not
the
half. It's not majority. It's just a plurality.
one thing that I found different too is the difference between the Democrats and the Republican. So the Democrats for support and somewhat support was 17% and 22%. And the Republicans 38% and 30%. So 68% of Republicans would be in favor and 39% of Democrats. Now, the question was also worded some Canadian province, wasn't all of Canada. So that was, I'm curious too if it was all of Canada, if that would change from the Republican side, because when it's being talked about online on the Republican side, everyone's like, heck no, that would mean a constant Democrat state. Like, Canada's so
Yeah.
woke, so far gone woke. And even like people, when we mention just Alberta in the online world, most of those like MAGA type says, no, it's too woke. They don't even know that Alberta is a conservative province. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of interesting to see the
Yeah,
difference
we could
there.
have worded this many different ways. If we had
Yeah.
said if like we wouldn't have said if the US wanted to annex Canada, we'd get a really low percent. But if we said
Yeah.
if all of Canada decided it would want to come into the US, we'd probably get a lower percent too. You'd probably get lower Republicans because they'd be like, "Oh God, I
Yeah.
don't want Toronto," but I don't know how much. And then I think there's like an aspect of Democrats who are like, "Well, I don't want to absorb another culture. Like we
Mhm.
value and respect culture." Because they put every culture in front of ours. So I think the results would be lower there. If we said if some conservative Canadian provinces wanted to secede from Canada, you'd probably see a 70 or 80% Republican support, and
Mhm.
Democrats would probably drop to 20. And I think support might get into the mid 40s then. I'm just guessing, like, but yeah, there's a million ways we could ask this question.
One
Uh,
of the things that really hit me when I was at CPAC, Mike Rowe was there, the guy from Dirty Jobs, and it was at the dinner, and he had a speech about the lack of workforce needed in US. He mentioned something like there was a company that came to him and says, "We need workers." And he asked him, "How many do you need?" 200,000. And he's like, "Well, I don't know where we
yeah,
can find that." That's how many this big manufacturing company needed that many to supply. And there's a huge problem with the trades and just manufacturing job itself. Now, do you think with that, if their workforce or if Trump was to say, open it up, okay, Canadians, we have all these manufacturers where Americans are filling the jobs, but we need more. Are you willing to come? What do you think would the support would be? Not necessarily Canada joining the US, but maybe Trump opening the border for Canadians to come instead of
yeah.
immigration from countries that don't have similar values.
Let me try and pull something up when I talk. We have a lot of immigration questions, but it's almost always framed in terms of like Mexico. Um, we do have a problem with workers, and I think Trump's been saying he's going to deport every single illegal alien. I don't think it's going to be like that, and I can tell you, I know from firsthand from people who work within the Beltway on immigration that one of the main problems that we still have, why we still have so much illegal immigration, is because there is still a big Republican, big business lobby that's interested in essentially having like free slave labor. Because the federal government is controlled by Republicans right now. And if they wanted to, they could mandate a program that we have called E-Verify that means every single person every company hires has to get checked against the Social Security database to see if they actually have a record, and that does not happen right now. And I've been told that's never going to happen because big business Republicans want their free labor, and it's probably because of that kind of thing. Trying to look for one of these ones that we might have. Some favor or oppose giving lifetime work permits to most of the approximately 2 million illegal residents. No. Do you favor or oppose giving lifetime work permits to most of the estimated 12 million illegal residents? It's all framed in terms of illegal aliens. I can tell
Mhm.
you, like, we've asked generally about legal immigration, and people say essentially, even Democrats, that's America's full. We said in a question, like, here's the current level of immigrants, legal immigrants, and I think it's 1 million in the question. And then we say, well, do you want 0, 250, 500, the current level, or higher, like 1.5 or 2 or whatever? And the number was in the teens of people who want a level higher than the current level, and a majority wanted a level lower than the current level, and there was a really high signal for like 0. That's probably the closest. And it's an economic signal. It's like, well, I can't afford a house. If more people come in, then there'll be less jobs to go around, there'll be less housing to go around. And that's why the establishment has been pitted so against the American worker. But when you have like most Democrats wanting less legal immigration, and the Democrats are actually like really against illegal immigration as well, it's just their leaders are not.
No,
So
no.
that's the trend. It's like DC does what's in the best interest for lobbying contributions, and Americans want something very different than what DC wants.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious if the questions were to be asked from instead of illegal immigration, if it was, yeah, like even in December. I remember in December when there was like the whole discussion. I think it's called HB1.
H-1B, yeah.
H1B. Yeah, and everyone was saying no, we should just uh, take the people that we have in our country to do these jobs, but some of these things we just don't there just isn't enough. But in Canada it's a little bit different. I didn't know you guys didn't verify with the social insurance number. In Canada
No.
we do. The difference in Canada is our immigration is not necessarily illegal. There is some. Most of them apply for refugee status, but that you can't work in Canada for a business unless you have a social insurance number, and it's very much tracked for the most part. I think better than the US. But we have just opened doors for legal immigration for low income earners. So or low income jobs. And that's been like the tap's been flowing into Canada, and not in a good way, in a really bad way. So but yeah, it's kind of interesting to see
We just asked
what.
something very tangential to this, and it shows you there is still a very like bleeding heart aspect of liberalism. So Trump had just suggested having a gold card visa program that if you're a rich investor, you could buy for $5 million and then get fast tracked, like I guess, like get a visa to come here. And it was not well approved of. It was like 41% approved and 47% disapproved, but it was approved more by Republicans by a lot. But then the next question, which is better for America? Poor immigrants who work for a living or rich immigrants who bring investment money to the country? And the party signal was wild here. Democrats said poor immigrants 62% to 20. Republicans said rich immigrants 49 to 25. Very different. So there's this idea there, like the Republicans are like, no, we need to do what's better for America. Get that money over here. And the Democrats are still like, no, it's like America's a land of milk and honey and everybody needs to come here. Now, we could have asked that probably in a little less even-handed way and gotten, there it is,
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, and I haven't seen polls like that done in Canada. I'd be really curious to see, like we've seen polls done on immigration, like most of the polling in Canada saying immigration's not good, but I'm curious as to that one. But see, I guess there's no point in polling it because rich people don't come to Canada. Rich people don't come in and set up their capital in Canada just because the taxes are so much more, and there's way more market and opportunity in US. But maybe that should be an indication that Canada needs to fix this problem.
Well, it probably
Yeah.
needs some fiscal, overhaul. It probably needs some lower corporate tax. Like countries do this all the time, try and make themselves more enticing, cut the red tape, like, Hong Kong, Singapore. You could, I like, there's probably an opportunity for that, but it's like, what was let me ask you this. And I have no idea what the answer is going to be. In the last 12 months, what is the number one policy point that the CPC has been put?
Fix the economy It would be before the tariff. It was like, let's fix the economy, cut the tax. Like their whole slogan was carbon tax election. So we have extra tax on everything.
Yeah.
So that would have been that would probably be the biggest one.
So like roll back climate taxes kind of thing.
Yeah, so the carbon tax is like anything it's on everything. Even some of the
Yeah.
stuff that you don't think it's on fuel. So it affects transportation, so it affects food for that own purpose alone. It's on farming, although they get somewhat of an exemption, but it's on like home heating, everything. But it's actually the cause for the increased inflation problem we have in Canada, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
So that would
But
that would have been one.
if I were to poll Canadians, what would your average CPC supporter say to the question, what is to blame for increasing global temperatures? Natural forces or man-made carbon dioxide?
You'd have this is my suspicion. If we polled just CPC supporters, I think 60% would say sun, like natural causes, not human cause, not carbon, and probably 40% of CPC would say carbon. Or
That's
maybe
actually not bad.
maybe
That's not that different than Republicans here. So our
maybe
thing
it'd
is
be
like,
a little
okay,
bit less, but the problem is the CPC will never say that climate change is not caused by carbon because they think they'll never win an election. That's like one of the top things that the liberals, the left, pushed in the last election is climate
yeah,
change. It's one of the attack things. So the elected officials won't say it, but the voter base don't necessarily agree with it. But maybe
yeah.
comments think differently, but that I would say that would be my perspective. Like
So
as in, yeah.
Trump's been attacking it when asked, but he's very smart in that it's not our number one issue. Our number one
Yeah.
issue is economic and a referendum on government overreach.
Mm.
And so the economic and government overreach platform positions have been deport them all, build a wall, crack down, drain the swamp, essentially. And he's very smart to like not step in these traps. Like, DeSantis supporters here wanted to open abortion up as an issue, and Trump was very intelligent of like, sidestepping it. But like that's a really big problem for you guys
Mhm.
if the number one policy position that your politicians think would improve the economy is to roll back carbon taxes when only a relatively small portion of people who it's like most of the people that support him aren't like disagreeable, anti-anthropomorphic climate change people. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? It's like
Mhm.
Trump supporters want illegal Mexicans gone. They want everybody illegal gone. They want the military on the border. They want a wall. They don't know why we don't have a wall. They want to put people in catapults. And so it's like if they're going to run on rolling back like carbon taxes, like you got to cultivate a base that craves that, right? And
Mhm.
it's like if they're it just sounds like amateur hour, It's
Well,
like
I think those numbers may probably has changed in the last little while because people were willing to admit they didn't want the carbon tax, but they weren't necessarily willing to admit that carbon
yeah,
wasn't a pollution or that it was naturally caused. Like I don't think they were willing to go to that level, but I think because they've been suffering so much from the carbon tax, they're like, okay, we've had enough of this. I think even liberals have had enough of the carbon tax, even though they're still believing everything in climate change. They like all the new candidates that are running in the liberal leadership, like the primaries, all of them have said we're going to repeal the carbon tax.
oh wow,
So, which is kind of funny because they realized like that was the biggest issue and that was the biggest thing that got Pierre to gain momentum. So they repealed it. Although I think if Mark Carney gets in, his idea is worse. He wants to not charge it on everything like per se, but he wants to charge it on all the big industries. So like metal. So it's going to be hidden. So people won't necessarily see it physically because it won't be on their heating bill, but it'll increase the cost of everything and inflation. And it'll push out big industry because it's going to be more expensive to produce what they want to produce in Canada than it would be anywhere else. So I don't think, and most Canadians, like most middle ground voters, I don't think understand that. Pierre's done a really good job at trying to explain it, but like the media won't explain it.
Yeah, they
So
probably need to pivot to something like climate
Mhm.
change is one that is like, I don't know about you guys, but they've been indoctrinating people for decades. And it's such a Schrodinger's box of like data. Like you can really, there's no decisive way to prove it or disprove just because there's so much
Mhm.
misinformation out there. But like just running down some of these questions, like American Republicans are even kind of split on this. Is the world actually getting warmer? Our Republicans say yes, 43% to 35%. Is
But
the
it's
world
actually
getting?
getting colder.
I know exactly,
The
and
data
obviously,
shows it's
like
getting colder.
I know, but Trump's not out there pounding on this. It's not
No.
something that's in conservative news. There's not like a conversation happening about it, and so the latent level of psychological operations have taken hold. If the
Mhm.
world is getting warmer, is it primarily due to man-made CO2 emissions, or the sun's going through the same cycles it's gone through for millions of years? And Republicans say, okay, well, sun cycles, 48% to 35%. So even that's not a big signal. True or
Mhm.
false, both the Arctic and Antarctic polar ice caps grew in size last year. And Republicans say false, only 36% of them, 25% say true. True or false, the Earth's temperature on average have been higher than they are today for most of human existence. Like Republicans don't know the right answers. Like only 46% say true. So it's like
Wow.
if somebody were going to run on some climate change focused policy, you're pissing into the wind. Like there's nothing to work with here. But it's like,
Mhm.
well, are illegal immigrants taking my jobs? Like, yeah, probably.
Mhm.
Like,
It's
are there
mhm.
problems with the migrants that you're taking in? Like, do you need immigration reform? Are you is like we did the numbers on my show? I think you guys are taking in 3% of your population in legal immigration each year, and
Mhm.
many of them, like you said, are on social services, right?
Not necessarily. There's a lot of refugees that are on assistance. So government refugees, they're mostly low income earning jobs. So they'll work like at fast food chains and things. Like you can't go in Canada, especially like where I live in Saskatchewan. You can't, like, it's very rare that I go to like a drive-through and it's a white person working. It's all immigrants, all immigration. So, and I'm not anti all immigration. I do think that there's times where immigration is really good for a country and times where it's having a negative effect. I think right now, because it's been so much, it's having a negative effect. And not only that, it's there's so many of them coming in, there's no resources or time to assimilate them. So they're
Yeah.
not assimilating into the current culture. They're only building their own within Canada, so there's no like programs to help them with Western culture. And I think that's one of the things that people are really upset about. So they feel like the world around them is changing. And I would say I've felt it too, to a certain extent. Like I've hired immigrants before. I've hired Filipino nannies because when I worked up north and stuff, like because I couldn't find anyone who fit the criterias to hire. Like we had live in. But there there are times where you start realizing you don't recognize your home anymore and you don't recognize your community anymore because the culture has completely changed.
Yeah.
And that is happening, and that's one of the biggest things that are upsetting Canadians. That's why they want it stop. And like I remember 2 Decembers ago, my husband and I went to Montana for over Christmas. So we just went on a trip to get away and stuff. And I was like, "Wow, it feels like what Canada felt like 10 years ago or 15 years ago."
They're never going to
Mm.
run on that, and you know as well as
No,
I do
no.
exactly why.
No,
So it's got to
no.
be an extension of that. We're lucky in that the amount of clown world stuff that Democrats pulled in our country was ridiculous. Um, because it got to where violent crime was like our number 3 issue. A lot of that's border related. We have the fentanyl. We have all of the ridiculous amount of government taxpayer money that was spent on housing illegal immigrants and refugees who have no hope of ever assimilating, and just all of these viral instances of people that quite clearly are never planned to.
Yeah.
And so there is a cultural aspect where it's like no, we're America, you're bringing in non-Americans, but it was never the leading edge of this because
No.
so that's the problem. It's like Pierre is not going to come out and say, well, we need to
No.
maintain the culture of traditional Canadians. They're going to call him a Nazi or
No.
something.
That would be political suicide. And I'm
Yeah.
not, but at the same time, he can say things like youth are having a hard time finding jobs. Like my daughter's 15, she could be looking for work, but they're not hiring because they have all low income earning immigrants filling those positions. So like that could be a thing. Like, why are youths not being able to find jobs right now? But yet we're bringing in immigration. That could be something that Pierre could talk to, and that would reach like that young generation. It's not just that they don't want to do it. I don't think that's realistic either. So there are ways I think it could be approached in a more strategic way that would people would think, "Oh yeah, it is affecting me." Right?
And somebody's already done some of this thought work. Do you know who's the National Post?
They're
You
a
know
news
that?
organization. They're probably the more conservative news. Like they write articles. They don't do like video content.
Hop in the private chat. So this is exactly where, based on what you're telling me, that like this is the first thing I would poll on, and I would ask these questions right here in this article. Nearly half of Canadians favor mass deportations, and 65% think there are too many immigrants. That is a big deal. Like that,
Mhm.
that's very similar. Our number of mass deportations got up to 59%, so you guys could get it a little higher probably. But when half your country favors mass deportations, the conservatives should be calling for this. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like
But
this is a winner.
they won't. Like it's very like he says he'll deport the ones who's are here illegally. Um but we again our problem with immigration is not that they're here illegally. They're here and they were allowed in legally. Now, a lot of these people's permits are expiring. That the question is it going to be extended? I don't know. But so it's a little bit different wording, but I think a lot of people have been
Yeah.
critical of Pierre for not going as strong as he should have on this, especially since the support was there. And then what happened is the liberals recognized that and the left actually started saying, yeah, our immigration is out of control. We need to do something about it. So the liberals actually brought it up before the conservatives were going mainstream with it. And I think that was a really big missed opportunity for the CPC. And the main reason they didn't is because the second they do, they get called racist, attack, you don't believe in immigration. And a lot of the conservatives want to continue getting the support of some of these communities that are pro-immigration. For example, like the Muslim community, in a lot of ways, have values that are very conservative, but they've often in history in Canada voted left because that means more of their family and friends can get brought in because the liberals were the one bringing in all the immigration. So yeah, it's a really strange it's very different. It's
Well, they
very
need to
different than
step
the
in and
US.
lead. They need to lead. They need to look at the
Mhm.
polling numbers and understand the public opinion. Scroll down. There's
Yeah,
a paragraph at the bottom. So like right under there. Okay, scroll back up.
up,
Right there. So down. Sorry.
down.
Yeah, down.
Oh, you want me to scroll more?
Yeah. There. Okay. So
Do you want me to read it
it's
out?
actually a nuanced position, right? So you have at the top it says, well, 65% say that half support mass deportations, 65% say there are too many immigrants. But if you look at some of these others here, okay, well, 70% say they tend to take jobs that those born in Canada don't want to do.
Mhm.
So 40% believe they're taking jobs away from Canadians. So it's like what I would do here is like there should be research, like who's researching how
Yeah.
many jobs immigrants are taking away from Canadians, because that's probably a really good angle to run on. It scratches that like economy's falling apart itch. It's a good platform that isn't racist and xenophobic, and it's like you're going to get a 60% level of support, and you should be able to get it up to 70, right? Because we
Mhm.
got I think 64% said that they supported Trump's mass immigration program after video was already showing up on the nightly news of people getting carted off in vans. So, and then the other thing about this is that you guys just got to stiffen up and deal with the racism attacks. We went through a cycle,
Mhm.
back in 2016 to 2020, where everybody was super inflamed about race. They called Donald Trump a Hitler and Nazi and said he was racist. And now you don't hear that anymore. They don't really do that. They've shifted
Doesn't
on to other
work.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't work at all. And we asked this question just like less than a year ago. How concerned are you that you might be accused of racism? And only 13% of Americans are very concerned. Only 16% somewhat concerned. Only 26% of white people are concerned they're going to get called racist. So it's like,
See, in Canada,
things
we're
got too bad.
behind.
Yeah.
In Canada, we're behind from that. The conservatives are a lot still concerned about that. When Tucker Carlson came to Edmonton, I remember that was part of his message. He's like, they're going to call you that anyways. They're doing it to silence you, to make you stop asking questions, to stop telling people what you actually think. He's like, you need to move past that. And I think he was trying to encourage Canadians to do that. I know he came here with saying we need to liberate Canada, but I think the biggest thing is to get us to get to the point of recognizing mentally the same thing the US has already recognized.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you're a different culture. You have different
Mhm.
laws. You have different politicians. And you have to go through your own cycle. But ultimately, I think what happens is that y'all have to get more disagreeable. And whatever
Mhm.
it takes to do that, I'm surprised that the country that was able to put together that just astounding trucker protest, it's like, what happened? Like, what happened to you guys?
Well,
Now
I'll
I know
tell
it was just
you,
a small group of people, right? But it's like,
it wasn't.
um,
It was 20 to 30% of the population. A lot of the people who supported the truckers were fully vaccinated. The ones who
yeah,
weren't would be 20% of the population. What happened was the government came down so hard on it, we felt completely demoralized. And we're like, what's the point of fighting? We're just going to have our bank seized. We're just going to go to jail. And they're still pushing that message because Tamara and
yeah.
Chris are still facing court cases from way back when. They're still potentially going to face jail. So I think it just, Canadians got demoralized. And that group of people, I'm sure if you look online, the narratives trying to push that the people only protested the trucker convoy because they wanted to join American. But that's not actually what happened. I think that group of people have lost so much trust and faith in our country. We're like,
Yeah.
yes, please take us over the US. At least we'll have a constitution that will be protected. We don't believe we have a charter of rights and freedom anymore. We believe it's just going to be encroached on the next time they want to do it. And like this tariff war is another example. Like a lot of us are really concerned that they're going to do the Emergency Act again and say we're in this tariff war, therefore we must do everything to control you guys to make sure, where we're doing this for your good. Like I honestly believe they're going to start taking those same steps. And like all of us who were awake during COVID, I'm like, wait a minute, who else is seeing a replay here? Who else is seeing the same kind of behavior that happened during
As,
COVID? But now it's
as
not get vaccinated, it's buy Canadian.
as any elected conservative leader come out and decried all that stuff.
Well,
said,
they so
no,
they
no, it's wrong to debank these people. No, we have to have hearings to understand why they were targeted. Um, no, cracking down on people's speech rights, whatever yours are, like, is wrong. Like,
um some, but not to the extent like the US has defended us more than
yeah,
our own politicians. They I'll tell you exactly what they're doing. Instead of dealing with it to ensure it never happens again, what they've done, they've just stopped talking about it. They ignore it
yeah.
completely.
So we had something very similar January 6th. There's some
Mhm,
differences. There are some differences.
mhm,
And they overreached and put these people in jail without trials, and it was really horrible. And it was a big issue. A lot of people were concerned about it, but a lot of people weren't because they looked at January 6th and said, "Oh, they never should have done that. It was horrible." But the problem is that our government then proceeded to overstep and try and throw Donald Trump in jail for essentially BS, and
mhm,
that backfired. Like, that actually, you know, Trump was very, very much like supporting those people. Trump very much was still taking heavily anti-establishment positions, like accusing the Biden administration of election theft and stuff like that. Like, he didn't back down on these issues of principle, and they had to come after him so hard that they basically got him elected. And
mhm.
so I'm just not like hearing strong leadership, which tells me that you guys haven't found the right person yet. And that's probably what you need. And I don't know who it is. Maybe you can draft an
Well,
American. I don't know if Jordan Peterson's got the intestinal fortitude to take it on for
it's
you, but
someone said in the comments, Maxime Bernier has spoken out. So there is like another right-leaning party, the PPC. Unfortunately, they've done a lot of mistakes with aligning with certain people, like basically allowing the image of the party to be really seen as very like way more anti-Jewish, right-wing extremists, like, and things like that. So, but Maxime Bernier is not a Trump. He's not charismatic. He in fact, a lot of people don't like him. They don't even know why. And he's part of the old establishment. He might not be now, but he started as an MP, was along all of that. So I don't think he's it, because I don't think he's electable. I don't think he can pull people. If anything, his support during COVID was super high because people were so pissed off at the conservatives for
yeah.
not being conservatives that they went to Maxime, but that's dwindled down more and more. And like, some people might not like hearing this. This is just a reality of the state that we're in and where voters are in Canada. So, and the way they've run the party, like, you can't even replace Maxime Bernier as leader if you wanted to. It's run almost like a corporation. So there's so many negative
Yeah,
things
that's the
about it.
problem.
Yeah, what we need is, I don't think Trump would work in Canada with his personality. We need a Ronald Reagan in Canada. That's what we need. A Ronald
There's
Reagan, or that type of messaging, but with a backbone like Trump. That's what we need.
Well, somebody who believes in principles, obviously charismatic in their own way, whatever. There's
Mhm.
an aspect of cultural zeitgeist that just needs to be R&D and whatever. But the biggest hump is like, well, whoever it is needs to take over the CPC somehow. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how things are set up, but it's like, if you're talking about like building a new party from scratch and splitting votes, and again,
It won't
I'm
work.
not sure how your governments are formed, but that seems like a heavy friggin' lift. Um, and it seems like there's a vacuum in the CPC of like true leadership, I guess, is what it sounds like. Let me ask you this. Uh, I haven't really been following, but how pro Trump is Mr. Wonderful?
Pierre?
Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary. Do you guys know him? Follow him at all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know that's who you guys call what you guys call him, Mr. Wonderful.
Oh yeah, he was on our show Shark Tank. He
Yeah,
has
yeah,
his own
yeah.
persona here. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know. I didn't know that's what he was called. I know he knew he was on Shark Tank. Um, I think Kevin O'Leary is pro-Trump. He's friends with Trump. He's
Yeah.
trying to negotiate deals with Trump to promote Alberta. I think it wouldn't shock me if he was for like Alberta separating. But you know
Is he
what?
pretty
Like,
well respected?
not by the left, by conservatives maybe, but even then, like, Daniel Smith, which was the premier of Alberta, was the only one kind of pushing the way and saying, hey, let's not make the US our enemy. Let's figure out how we can work with them. So he was kind of teaming up with her. But I don't know. He did run for the leadership a while back. He
Really?
might be, yeah, and he didn't win. So this would have been, I think if I Google it, here, I'll just ask Grok.
2017.
Oh, in 2017. So, but
Get,
back
get
then,
Canada back on track.
yeah, maybe he would be that.
Others saw him as a disaster, calling him a money-grubbing monster or a traitor. Eesh.
Ugh.
Who got laughed out
Yeah,
of the country.
he does have like that image. Like if I think of Kevin O'Leary, I think someone who's really about like enriching themselves. Not that I want to think that. That's just kind of the image that I have, that it's all about money and getting successful, not necessarily like there's no empathy with the low level people. Like there's no, like Trump, even though he's a billionaire, he has a way of connecting with the blue collar everyday American. So, and I would say Pierre might do that. Like I don't want to fully rule out Pierre. Maybe the way he's behaving now is just so he can get elected, and once he gets in, he'll go all out. Like maybe that's actually who he is, but
Yeah.
recognizing Canada, it's going to be really hard to get elected because we're not the US. So maybe that's the case,
Yeah,
but
but like looking at those polls, the CPC was leading and on the way up.
mhm.
And it's like, it's hard to say that where we're at now with America and Trump and this tariff situation was unforeseeable.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to say it was unforeseeable. And so for the CPC to take such a kick in the pants in the polls over just the last month, like that's a real problem. And it
Mhm.
tells me it's like the level of political savvy, opportunism, leadership, I don't know. It's just like not there. Or again, I don't know everything that's going on. I'm just saying it's like they lost
Well,
like 10 to 15 points in the polls, and maybe they'll get it back. I don't know, but it seems like a wrong time to get it. Your liberals are probably like super motivated right now.
the thing is, you got to understand there's another thing that really differentiates politics in Canada than the US. Canadians are not very involved in politics. The more involved than we've ever seen, the numbers is probably in recent years because of COVID. But like, for example, our primaries is called leadership races or nomination races. You guys primaries, like 30 to 40% of people show up to vote in the primaries. In Canada, it's less than 1%.
Yeah,
Not
that's
only
great.
that,
That's great. That tells me that a grassroots movement can very easily hack that crap.
well, yes. So that's great if you can organize the grassroots people. And we did that in Saskatchewan. Like our organization got involved in several nomination races, and every one we got involved, we got our candidate elected. So we're super successful. I guess it's kind of like the Tea Party. Is that what it's called? The US? Like if you were to compare, there was like a Tea Party movement. We could potentially
Yeah.
do that in Canada and have massive success just because there's low voter registration, low party getting involved in the party. Now there's
Yeah.
another thing. There's
I've seen
not
you
a
guys
lot of
have
money.
really low turnout. And I don't know if this
Yeah.
is overall population and maybe it's due to the immigrant factor, but 60 to 65% in the last. So it's like if things are getting bad, like what I would expect to see is like increasing turnout because people are like, oh man, we got to change leadership. And so I really don't understand this trend at all.
Yeah, and I don't think right now we're at the point of trying to change leadership per se. I guess the next election will determine that. Like Pierre won on the first ballot. Like it was a different kind of election. There's more than one ballot. So he won on the first ballot. Like the majority of conservatives in Canada really liked Pierre. And like I really liked him and I still like him, but I really been disappointing in some of the tactics he's
Yeah.
taken in the last couple of weeks. But there's another thing. There's not a lot of money in politics in Canada. So politicians don't have a ton of money to put out proper messaging. It's not like you guys have tons of like ads on TV and stuff like that. We've got like none. We barely have anything.
No,
We don't
that'll all come.
Mhm.
It all comes down to the leadership and the right platform, in my opinion. And here's how I can explain why. You need a Trump-like character that doesn't have to be a carbon copy of Trump, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And it needs to be whoever's right. I was just throwing out Kevin O'Leary. I don't know his background or whether he's that right person. I don't think it's like, ultimately, here's what it comes down to is you have problems. You have like housing affordability
Mhm.
crisis. You're being overrun with immigrants. Your government spending is 44% of your GDP. You have a over 100% debt to GDP ratio. You have major trade like issues. Like, there are freaking problems. People have
Mhm.
affordability crises. I think you have bad health outcomes because of your nationalized healthcare. But you guys don't sound angry, because why is voter turnout at 60%? And why is Pierre Poilievre talking about common sense? Common sense isn't the kind of words that you say when you're running on a platform of anger. And you're never going to have a populist uprising unless people are angry. I actually just polled a question in America, and people don't poll this kind of thing either. How angry are you at the level of fraud, waste, and abuse in your government? And we got 7 out of 10. So people are really angry here. And so that paired up with Trump. And Trump says that people are angry because these politicians aren't giving them what they need. And he had help. He had like Steve Bannon and other people within a circle saying, well, like, here's what that political platform would look like. Here's how you can exploit the political realities and context. And so you guys need that. But what happened is Trump he was an outsider and he did have money, but he didn't spend much of it before the Republican primaries. And his performance was so off the charts different and perfectly calculated to stoke anger at the Republican establishment that what happened is he gained an army of grassroots supporter on the internet that he didn't even
Mhm.
have to go build. Like, he had millions of people on the internet making memes for him, like
Mhm.
spreading information about his platform. And what was incredible is that was like just what it needed. Like, he got those people because he nailed it. And his platform was so different from the way that Republicans talked about politics that America did need that kind of socialization. And I think it's really the main reason he won is just this constant, like, putting all this information. The Tea Party didn't have that. The Tea Party was good at getting
Mhm.
like protests out there. And so that was good because Republicans saw anger. But then what happened is
Mhm.
the Republicans just like very cynically co-opted the Tea Party movement and gave them nothing. And so the Tea Party basically fizzled out as a massive failure because it was co-opted by establishment. So it's like
Mhm.
somebody needs to come in and brainchild a populist uprising, because that's what Trump was. And it doesn't sound like Pierre.
There's been some in the past in Canada. I think the Reform Party, which I wasn't following po politics back then, and funny enough, this uprising was after Trudeau's dad, was the prime minister and destroyed Canada and
The
destroyed the
real dad
West.
or the fake?
It's well, the fa the one who raised him.
Okay, right,
But
right.
and but yeah, after that, Preston Manning was the one who kind of pushed that. And like, people, they were doing town halls, people were coming and they were joining, and it took a lot of momentum. But then what happened is you'd have the Reform Party and I think it was called the Progressive Conservative Party. Then what happened, it split the vote, and it ensured the Liberals were in even longer. So the problem we've got in Canada is there's, like, right now, one Conservative Party, but there's three or four left-leaning parties. Like, you guys have 2, so it's just 2 competition. So, and
Yeah.
everyone's afraid of a split the vote, so I don't think that would work either. But
No,
yeah,
well, that
if we
problem
can.
solves itself with leadership. I can tell you we have very
Yeah.
good evidence, because if you go back and look at our 2016 cycle, you see like real like turnout for third party candidates and stuff like that. And again, I think potentially one of the reasons Trump won, because Hillary Clinton was such a horrible candidate that a lot of people voted third party and stuff. But like the Libertarians, I forget what they got in 2016. It might have been 3 or 4%. I'm pretty sure they got less than like 1% now. And so it's like, as people got it, and as Trump he didn't build a Republican platform. It's so night and day different than Republican platforms.
Yeah.
It's literally just objectively what America, the majority of America needed. And again, because of Biden, things got bad. Everybody's like, well, we just can't afford to vote third party. And, even RFK Jr. was pushed into Trump's arms. So, like at a certain point, like with the right leadership, I don't like, who are your third parties? Who's that one that was getting like 8%? Is that Greens? 4%.
Say that again. Sorry,
Who's this? Who's this BQ again? Who are they?
BQ? Oh, yeah, that's the Parti Québécois. So it's like the Quebec Separatist Party. They're in Quebec only.
Yeah. And yet they're still taking 6% of the government.
Well, you got to understand that our electoral system is not fair like yours is in the US. Ontario and Quebec basically decide how the rest of Canada is going to function. So even though it's all conservative in the West, by the time it gets to the West, the election is already decided. Our votes don't even matter. Like who we elect doesn't matter. So because of that, like even our Senate is the same. Like in Alberta, I think we have, is it 4 Senate or is it 6? I'm trying to remember. Anyways, Alberta and Saskatchewan has the same amount of Senate seats. And Alberta has like 5 million population. Saskatchewan has 1 point something. And then New Brunswick has almost the same amount. And New Brunswick is like a fraction of Alberta. Like it's not fair. It's not distributed fair. It's distributed so that Quebec and Ontario get to decide who runs the country. And because of that, Quebec holds so much cards that they basically get everything they want. I'm actually going to share a tweet about this.
Yeah, I'm just looking back. So it's like CPC was plus 27 in a poll in the beginning of June. And 38, 39, 44. And that's still not enough to win. Yeah.
The NDP, which is another party. So there's the Liberals, NDP, and Bloc Québécois, and Green. The NDP voter bribery begins for Quebec. So basically they're saying in Quebec, I'm just going to share this because it gives you a glimpse. In Quebec, Quebec is saying we're not going to allow natural resources pipeline basically to go through Quebec. So we could feed all of the East Coast with our oil, but we don't have pipelines going from Alberta to the East Coast. We have a refinery in the East Coast, but it's all imported oil from Saudi Arabia, Russia, other countries. And Quebec is saying, no, we're gonna put protections to make sure nobody can tell us about natural resources. They're not allowed to tell us anything. And the NDP is siding with them. So, but Quebec has that much influence in the election that works.
Yeah.
And that's why Western separatism is so high. Alberta is like, we're so tired of elitists in Quebec telling us how to run our country, telling us if we can do oil and gas or not, telling us that we have to go to net zero when it destroys all the industries in the West.
Yeah, it's like realistically, I think CPC needs to be at like plus 35 is ultimately what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
Horrifying. Yeah,
And
so maybe it is for separation.
That's why I'm saying like Alberta and Saskatchewan are almost looking at this scenario and thinking like there's not really much hope for us if we stay in Canada. So when you look to potentially joining the US, what that could look like, it's way, way higher. And it's funny because had you asked me 5 years ago, would I be considered a separatist? I would have said, heck no. Like I was so attached to my Canadian identity. But after seeing what happened during COVID, what they did to the truckers, even what they're currently doing, the net zero, the woke stuff being pushed everywhere, I'm like, I don't think this type of Canada reflects the Canadian I used to be.
Yeah.
I don't think it reflects me anymore. So
Yeah,
I know
I
that's
think that's fair to
bleak.
say that's what most Americans were saying too. I mean, I'm just grokking stuff, and
Yeah.
it's like it doesn't just sound good. Like I asked, when was the last time Polyev talked to Trump? Grok's like, damn, I don't know. On February 28th, Trump mentioned Polyev during a press interaction at the White House while meeting Ukrainian President Zelensky. Trump remarked, I don't like what he's saying about me. It's just not positive about me, and speculated that Polyev's electoral chances, saying maybe he won't win, but maybe he will. I don't care. So it's like, again, I can understand how you're going to distance from Trump for political reasons because he's saying he's going to annex Canada. But at the same time, I don't know if you guys fully understand the scope of what America's going through right now. That's only possible because of Trump. We're going to find out, I think, that probably half of our federal deficit is all people stealing money. We're going to find out that there are literally hundreds of thousands of federal workers that were doing, not only doing nothing, but holding like other jobs, or the money was going to dead people. We're going to find out our intel agencies were weaponized against us, and our own taxpayer money was used to conduct psychological operations and massive fraud and grift. And so it's like, if you're a wannabe leader of a Western nation that understands that America is going through something of that scope, it's literally biblical. Like, and so that concerns me. Like hearing that, it's like he doesn't get it. Like, scope of what's
No.
going on.
No, what he should be doing is saying they're exposing this in the US. We're looking into Canada and we're realizing it's even worse here. Like it is even worse in Canada. But you guys have even a bit more hope than we do because you guys still have your Supreme Court. We don't. Like all our court system are
Yeah.
appointed by whoever's in government because it's mostly left-leaning people. We
Yeah.
so okay, I have a very bleak view of Canada. I will be honest. It's
Oh,
not
you can
something
always emigrate. Like, you know what I mean?
It's funny because a lot of people have said that. I'm gonna give Canada 5 more years, and I'll tell you it's because I can't leave with my kids. I share custody of my 2 older kids. So even if I wanted to leave, I won't leave. I won't do that to my kids. They need their dad more than I need to get out of the Canada. So I'm gonna give Canada 5 more years. But like my husband's a doctor, so we could easily immigrate just for that simple fact alone. We've talked about it, we've considered it, and I'm just sharing my personal like experience with everything the Liberals government has done has pushed away doctors from Canada. So we have a huge lack of doctor issues. Our healthcare is in shamble, and we've lost a ton of doctors to the US and other countries, and it's only going to get worse. So we're giving it potentially 5 more years. If it keeps getting worse, we're gonna go for better opportunity. So, but I don't want to give up just yet. I'm gonna do whatever I can to try to influence even Pierre and the conservative government to recognize the state that we're in and what is needed right now. It's not this pandering to the left, being afraid of media and being afraid to address issues that affect everyday Canadian. I think they need to recognize that the everyday people have had enough and they're the ones suffering for their lack of action and their lack of direction when it comes to dealing with the problems we have.
Well, what
Yeah.
worked for us was anger at the government. And so hopefully that would work for you as well. Because everybody says, like, oh, Kamala Harris was a horrible candidate and stuff like that. But the sad fact is that most Democrats in America don't need a good candidate to vote for. They're just going to vote for her.
Yeah.
And the ultimate vote was like more or less, like 51 to 49. And yet only 30% said they trusted the federal government. So it was a referendum on the government because Trump was calling them oppressive and tyrannical and weaponized. And that's what, it was that anger that gave him the bump that he wouldn't have otherwise had because Democrats outnumber Republicans. So
Someone said Mark is a Chris Isaac doppelganger. Do you know who that is?
No, I have no idea. Look him
I
up.
wonder if he's that comedian I thought you were. Remember at AmFest? I'm like,
Singer,
are you a
songwriter, and
Canadian?
guitarist.
Does he look like you?
Maybe, I don't know.
No, I see a video of him. I don't think you do. Oh, he's a singer. Super handsome, David. That's a little gay.
Yeah,
Or
so
maybe
good.
you're gay.
No,
Anyways,
no problems there.
as
Four kids.
as
Four kids.
as as Mark Mitchell gets all beet red.
No, my camera is just oversaturated. It
The other
is.
night when I was on he says he's not gay. He's probably men can admire another handsome person. So he's talking about the singer or talking about Mark. I don't know. But it's kind of funny. We were on your show the other night and Jonathan, my husband, he actually watched the whole thing. And which usually he doesn't watch my show. Like he'll watch like at lunchtime. But he's like, "How did you think it went?" And I'm like, "Great." But I said I looked like a ghost compared to Mark because my
Oh, yeah,
lighting was
well.
like so white. So it's
Yeah, I
kind
don't
of
know what
funny.
it's like this. I just have it on auto setting, and for some reason, my camera wants me red. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe I cut
The
down
blue
on blue
light?
light. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's not that bad, but I was just comparing to myself, and my lighting was actually, like, way whiter when I was on your show, but it was such a contrast to yourself, but yeah, well, if you're okay, I'm thinking we've covered a lot of grounds. If you'd be willing to come back on my show, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
And I think the people watching as well really enjoyed it. So let's keep in touch and maybe if there's more issues that come to Canada, you know what? I think we should get you connected to doing polls in Canada. I think I should work on that because we
Well,
need a
I'd
lot
love
more.
to. I'd come in and do a poll of Canada and try and ask some populist questions. Maybe come at it from an angle people haven't before. And that's like the whole point of this kind of thing is you just throw a lot of questions at the wall and see what sticks. So maybe we touch base in a month again and you give me some ideas
Mhm.
to run on the American side about Canada, and maybe the CPC will bounce back by then. Maybe somebody should be talking to the Trump team and deconflicting here. Like this is friendly fire, and I don't know why it shouldn't. It shouldn't.
Yeah. No, it's true. There should be some discussions happening. And the only reason is Pierre thinks he needs to distance himself from Trump because 75% of Canadians don't like him, but he should be having diplomatic conversations with him, especially if he wants to show Canadians, hey, I can fix this problem more than the liberals, and this is how I'm going to do it. That the first way to do that is actually going and having conversations with Trump and say, this is what a deal would look like if I get elected. But I don't see that happening, and I think it's a huge mistake on the CPC's part. So,
Yep.
but yeah,
Trump's not going away, and he
no,
doesn't seem to be slowing down. So figuring out how to work with him in a way that's palatable to your own party is probably like the best bet. Uh,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm gonna close up the show, but yeah, if you're willing to come back on, I would love that. And let's see if we can get you connected with some people to see about maybe you guys becoming a Canadian pollster to some
Yeah, I'll
extent.
give it a shot. I'll try
That would
anything
be
once.
really
See how
awesome.
it goes. Get
Okay,
ourselves
thank you
a
so much.
French translator. Yeah, thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks. Maybe I can translate it for you. My first language is French, but I'll drop you down and then I'll just close off the show. But again, Mark, thank you. It was a
All
pleasure.
right. Happy to be here.
Wow, that was such an awesome conversation. I wasn't sure which direction this show was going to go. We didn't have a whole ton ready, but I think the kinds of discussions that we had was really eye-opening, and it gave us a perspective as to what America did to to change some of the stuff that was very problematic within their own government and to fix the broken system. We have a broken system and it definitely needs to be fixing. It needs to be fixed. Now the question is Pierre going to be the one to do that, or are we going to have to go through a lot more problems before that actually happens, before we see actual change? I'm I'm hoping that Pierre will. I'm hoping that he's going to start realizing right now the direction he's going is not necessarily a good one, especially if he wants to build that relationship with the US and fix the mess that this has caused. And again, I had people online, I'm going to talk about it. I had people online and recently really upset by the fact that I'm criticizing Pierre Polyev. And I did a tweet about this morning. I don't criticize Pierre because I want to have good ratings or that I want to hurt the party. My motivation is and always will be in this. I'm gonna share the tweet because it's better if I show it to you guys. I just got to get to the other screen. Again, I've criticized every politician. I've criticized Trump, I've criticized Pierre, I've criticized Maxime Bernier. I'm not a PPC member. I hold a CPC membership. I hold the SAS Party membership. I've criticized Scott Moe a lot. I've been unhappy with him a lot. So this is what I tweeted this morning. Growing up, my dad often asked me, Nadine, if everyone jumped off a cliff, would you? That question formed a core part of who I am. I have zero fear of going against the flow. You're not always going to like what I say. Sometimes I'll praise politicians or people you support, and other times I'll criticize them, especially when I think they're messing up. I'm also open-minded and willing to change my views when presented with new information. Some of my listeners have seen that. I had the president of the Taxpayers Federation come on my show, and I changed my mind on something right there on the show because I was presented with a different perspective, and I decided, oh, that makes sense. I'm gonna change my mind on this particular issue, and I think you're making a lot of sense, and what you're saying makes more sense than what I used to think. One thing you can always count on is I will always speak my mind. My loyalty follows this order: God, family, community, province, country, world, and the political affiliation comes last. If a party or politician's actions comes against any of these other priorities, you better believe it, I'll speak up. If more politicians operated this way, society would function a lot better. I'll give you examples of that. If a party is going all pro-war, pro starting a third world war, pro extending a war that's never going to end, that's only going to escalate into affecting my country, affecting my province, affecting my family, affecting everything in my life, I'm going to speak out and say what you're doing is wrong, and I think you need to pivot. So if you're talking about retaliatory tariffs that I know is only going to affect my community, my province, my country in a negative way, I'm going to say I think you're wrong. I think you're going in a direction that will hurt us more than not. Now, we can disagree on what the right reaction should be. We had a conversation with an American who shared a lot of thoughts on what that right reaction will be. But I can assure you one thing. I will never be a party line follower. Never. If you go, and I've never been that kind in my entire life. My loyalty will be to all those other things first. If a political party goes against that, I will speak up, even if it's the party that I'm likely going to vote for. It doesn't mean I'm going to vote for a different party. It's not going to mean that I'm going to go completely against everything else they say, but I'm going to speak up. And if you're looking for someone to toe the line, if you're looking for a sheep to follow the direction the crowd is going, I am not one of those people. I never have been, and I never will be. So if you watch my show, you'll know exactly who I am. You'll know exactly where my alliance and my loyalty stand, and my own actions will prove that. And I've been the same way. I didn't follow the flow during COVID. I'm not going to follow the flow now. I'm not going to react out of fear, out of panic. When I look at situations like the very big crisis we are in, I don't look at it in panic. We need to do this. We need to do that. I stop and think for a second, okay, what is the motivation from the other person doing this? What are certain things I can do that could potentially address the concerns that they have expressed? What are things that he's really focused on, like the auto industry, the fentanyl, or feeling like he's taken advantage of? I actually would call Trump and I would say, look, you listed a lot of things and I can understand why you're concerned about the things you're concerned about. How about we come up with a deal on how to address those in a way that will benefit both of us? How about we figure it out? How about we have a nice sit down meeting and hash this out? And I wouldn't start insulting him, antagonizing him, pushing the fear narrative, like the 51st state fear narrative that Pierre is also using as a divisive issue, the same way the liberals are. He's also using that. I wouldn't do that. So, but anyways, I'm missing a lot of comments, but this episode has gone already so far. It's going to be a little bit harder for me when I do my regular daily show. It's easy for me to address a lot of the comments, but when I have a guest, I don't want to not be paying attention to what they're saying, because I find that kind of disrespectful. So it's a lot harder to go. It's a lot harder to pay attention to all the comments, but maybe I'll take a minute or two to address it here right now. A lot of really nice comments. Clyde Do Something is getting nailed too for questioning PP's latest move or lack thereof. The fact is, most of the conservative commentator, those of us who have to do research day after day to create content for a show, we will look at a lot of different perspective. We will look at a lot of different information, and we know what economists have said about counter tariffs. We know that Pierre has avoided coming on our show, coming on podcast shows in Canada, for fear out of being labeled or attacked for going on the show. Like, we know all of this. I agree with a lot of what Clyde Do Something is saying, and that's actually why this whole situation came up. There were people ganging up on him, and I'm like, I want no part of this. If we have conservatives, and it takes a lot to put your voice out there and yourself out there and your name out there and advance conservative issues on the public square with your real name, with your real family, everything. It takes a lot to do that, and you take a lot of attacks. And I really hate when the people attacking you are people who are supposedly on your side. I really dislike that. And it's not just like attack, like coordinated attack because you said something that they didn't like. I can understand if my set of core beliefs goes against like the left. I can understand I can understand them doing that. But I have a really hard time with people who 95% agree with what I think, but yet want to completely cancel me because of the 5% that I don't. And unless it's like core issues, like if you're defending pedophilia, yeah, I'm not going to associate with you. I'm not going to have anything to do with you. But those are like hard lines where criminal things that I don't think should be accepted into society. For example, if you're platforming and defending the Tates, I'm probably not going to have you on my show. So, but you're free to do your own show. Maria says, everyone likes a strong, confident alpha male. Show us your stuff, Pierre. David says, get in touch with Clyde Do Something and Jasmine Lane and Elevate Podcasters. Do a panel. That would be awesome. I've actually reached out to them and said, hey, wouldn't it be amazing if we did something, like teamed up to do something, maybe even on some like famous podcaster in the States or something, even just to make it blow up even more. What if every content creator, every podcaster in Canada that has like somewhat of a following, somewhat of a viewership, was to come together on a table talk and talk about the Canadian issues, all the problems, and how we should fix it? I think that would be like super powerful. So I'm working on it. I'm looking into it, but and they've the only one I haven't reached out to Elevate Podcaster, but I've reached out to a few more that like Mark Nixon. Like there's so many in Canada that are starting up and that have started up, so many even in the last year, that are doing really good work. Some of them I featured here on my show, and some of them will be coming on my show as guests too, like Frank Vaughn. Yeah, Maria just agreeing with David. Firecracker says, if you're a politician, you're fair game. If you're doing something that isn't good for our country, we should all speak out. I agree. I don't think we should just be towing the party line. I'm not part of the CPC party as an MP. I move the needle. I sway public opinion. I do that by being very critical. Maria said for Nadine for Prime Minister, you know what? I do not want the job. Thank you. I don't want that job. Do I think I could do a better job? Maybe. Maria says Nadine for Premier of Saskatchewan. I'm hoping someone's going to step up and run. That's really good. I'm really hoping that. I told Jonathan, I said, I won't run for Premier, but you know what? If Saskatchewan becomes the 51st or 52nd state, I might run for governor. That I might consider. Yeah, David says I should read the chat comments after the stream. You can't get to them live. The problem is when after the stream is done and it's shut down and I go like on YouTube, it doesn't show the chat comments. It only shows them during the live. Like it doesn't post them in the comments of the YouTube. It's only if you go into the live stream and I think there's like an option to click see live stream chat comment. David says Clyde goes live every Friday night at 6 p.m. and Wednesday with Marty at North at times. David says that would be off the chart, probably the roundtable that I suggested. Yeah, Leighton Gray is another one. Yeah, if you guys have ideas of people to bring to maybe partner with and do something like that, Sean Newman would be another one that would be good to partner with. But wouldn't that be awesome if we all came together? I think it would be like chaos because everyone's kind of like an alpha type personality with a big voice, so everyone would like be jumping on top of each other. But yeah, anyways, I'm going to end the show. It's now 2 hours long. It's funny because Mark and I, we flow so well. We kind of challenge each other. So the conversation flows so well. I didn't even realize it had been 2 hours. So it just, I really, really like interacting with him. Shadow's another one. Yeah. So keep putting them in the comments and even after the show is done, because the more comments there are, even after the show is done, the more the video will have views. So, but yeah, I will let you guys go and I will see you guys on Monday. I don't have plans for next week as for guests, but I'll be on Monday. I'm sure I'll have tons of news to cover. If you don't follow me already, you can find me Nadine G. Ness on all social media platform, and make sure if you subscribe, like whatever the buttons are on whatever platform you're watching, and set notifications too so you get notified when I go live. Have a good night, good afternoon, and happy Friday. See you.